So in today's episode, I'm reporting from a dimly lit vehicle in a parking lot. What am I going to talk about? Stay tuned, you'll find out. Hello to all my friends out there in YouTube land. It is your good buddy Philtastic Phil here, and I want to welcome you back to my channel. So as you can see, I'm not in my home office right now. There's no green screen or anything like that. My wife has a doctor's appointment, and I am not allowed in because of COVID restrictions. So I am chilling here in a parking lot in the middle of the night. Well, I shouldn't say the middle of the night. It kind of just sounds creepier than it is. Here to talk to you about comics, because what's a better place to talk about comics than in your car? You know, think of it like this. It's kind of like the Bueller bus, but not a bus and not Bueller, and a little bit of cold because I'm in the New Jersey, I'm in northern New Jersey. I apologize if this is a little bit late. I didn't record this past week. We had my wife's baby shower, which was a virtual baby shower. And I mention that because I want to thank you guys, because without making these videos and, you know, learning, applying what I've learned in these videos, just want to see if somebody's coming up. Okay, no, somebody else is here. Wow. Yeah, this parking lot is pretty much deserted except for me. So when somebody pops in, I'm like, what's going to happen here? Is this a Scream movie? Anyway, as I was saying, I need to thank you guys because I applied a lot of what I've learned from this past year of making YouTube videos to make our virtual baby shower a success. So thank you for that. So now, why am I here? What am I going to talk about today in the parking lot? I'm going to talk to you today about the MCU comic book movies, but specifically the MCU versus everybody, because there's been a lot going on. And I'm telling you why I focus on the MCU. So this is a trend I first picked up on, I'm going to say maybe 2 years ago, maybe a little bit longer. Whenever Tarantino's last film, The Hateful Eight, came out, that's when I really first started hearing criticism about MCU films from others in the film industry. And it at the time, I kind of took it as just, oh, okay, well, he's an artist saying, well, this isn't art, which is a valid point. But I started hearing more and more. Elizabeth Banks, which we're going to get into, because I really do think that's a little bit hypocritical on her part, in my opinion, of course. Scorsese, and it's really kind of blown up, I've noticed, in the past 2 years. Some directors like Ridley Scott have criticized all superhero films. Steven Soderbergh, the same thing. But I've noticed a lot tend to specifically take umbrage with Marvel films. I noticed this, I'm going to say a little bit over a year ago. My wife and I have been enjoying all the streaming services since we can't go to a movie theater or whatnot. And one of the television programs we've enjoyed during this time has been an HBO series about female comedian called Hacks. Both of us are big comedy fans. Prior to COVID, I was at the Stress Factory in New Brunswick seeing different comics almost monthly, sometimes 2 or 3 times a month. So comedy is something I figure, oh, this is a show about comedy. We're going to enjoy this. And we did. It is a great show if you haven't checked it out yet. There was one specific episode where an up-and-coming female comic who's the focus of the show meets up with, I think it was like a college roommate or something like that. And her roommates are all like very professional. They're doing, sorry, somebody passed by again. Like I said, I'm just trying to make sure I'm not getting like axe murdered here or something like that. Anyway, yeah, all of her roommates are doing much, much better than she is. And, you know, she feels that sting a little bit. And one of them in particular, I guess you could say like the head roommate that she was really upset with, said, oh, I'm filming a Marvel film. They didn't say what film, but, you know, they kind of dropped it there. And then they came back to a little bit later in the show when she's talking to the main comedian, older woman who's been kind of counseling her. I think she's played by Jean Smart, who does a phenomenal job in it. And she says something to the effect of, well, those are crap. That's crap. You don't want to sell out. And it made me pause because it wasn't so much, well, you're talking crap about comic book movies. I mean, look, I don't have any skin in the game as far as comic book movies go. I enjoy them the same as you do, I'm assuming. But it struck me because HBO has been putting out, more so now than when that aired, of course, a lot of DC Comics related material because Warner Brothers owns DC Comics. So then I kind of took a step back and started really kind of seeing where criticisms lied as far as why people were complaining and what they were complaining about. When I mean people, of course, I mean these actors and directors and whatnot. The next one that kind of came on my radar in the same fashion was, and I'm going to mispronounce this kid's name wrong, I guarantee 1,000%, Timothy Challet. Young actor, he's very good. He was in that recent Dune film, which was very good, I have to say. Again, an HBO film, Warner Brothers, and one of the interviews, I think somebody said to him something like, what are the rules of acting that you follow, and what's the best advice you've gotten? And he said, yes, never be in a superhero movie, no capes or tights for me. So again, I was like, well, okay, you didn't call out Marvel, but what's the sting here? Why are people foo-fooing Marvel films or comic book movies in general? So why don't we do this first? I'm going to go back to where I first picked up on this. Again, a couple years ago with Quentin Tarantino. Tarantino released a film, Hateful Eight, which was a good film. Was it his best? No. To be honest with you, I thought it was a little too long, and I think it would have worked better as a play. That being said, I recall he wanted to do a big opening at the Alamo Drafthouse, a prestigious movie theater, I guess in the Los Angeles area. I've never been there myself, so I couldn't tell you. And he, I think during that time, was it either Infinity War or Endgame had just come out. And now, if you don't know, a lot of movie studios, when they have a big movie, they might turn around and tell bigger movie theaters, like, hey, look, we'll give you this movie, but you have to guarantee it's going to be on 10 screens for 2 months, something like that. Like, they mandate how many screens they can be on and how long it'll be there. Which, Infinity War was a huge movie. So, of course, all the movie theaters wanted to jump in on this. So, unfortunately, Tarantino couldn't have the big opening he wanted to. The big premiere, I should say, that he wanted to. Just checking. Okay. And I remember, and I'm paraphrasing, of course, because, again, I'm in my car. I'm not going to Google right now. He had said something like, after that, I will never do anything for Disney, never anything superhero related. I remember that kind of struck me as wrong because being a Tarantino fan, if you go back, like I am, if you go back and take a look at some of his earlier films, particularly Reservoir Dogs, he's got a bunch of kind of mentions and whatnot for The Thing, Invisible Woman, and even I could remember clear as day, and I thought this was the coolest thing when I saw it, in Mr. Orange's apartment, as he's picking through the change in his ashtray, you see a huge Silver Surfer poster, very prominent right behind him. And also a fun fact too, in case you didn't know this, at one point, it could have been after Pulp Fiction came out, if I'm not mistaken, Tarantino had said he wants to do a Luke Cage film. Now, that I think it's one of those ideas he's just kind of written off since. Tarantino's the kind of guy, he'll mention an idea and it may or may not come to fruition. I know Inglourious Bastards, for example, I think that took about 20 years. Oh, that might be just ice melting. And it took about 20 years just to come to fruition from when he said, I'm doing a movie called Inglourious Bastards. Moving on, I had mentioned Elizabeth Banks prior to that. I remember it was 2019. Elizabeth Banks, if you don't know, she's a pretty good actress. She's been in some interesting films. I haven't really seen anything I could say that's knocked it out of the park for me as far as her performances go. You could see that in the Zack and Miri. She's in the Zack and Miri film. She is. She had a small role in the Paul Reiser. Sorry, can't think of the guy's name now. Paul Rudd. There you go. Film Role Models, which is a very funny movie. I think it's the last of the really good comedies, in my opinion. That's a topic for another day. And she, with a role I think that she was best in is if you've watched the show 30 Rock. She was on for a while as Jack Donaghy's wife. Did a very good job on that. She did a remake in 2019 of Charlie's Angels with Kristen Stewart. I don't know, the vampire, the glitter vampire movies. That's what I call them. Anyway, so she was all hyped about it. She did a big press like, oh, this is a empowering film. This is a female-led action-packed movie. Big release by Columbia, who's, in case you didn't know, owned by Sony. And the film went nowhere. It bombed. In fact, I've never seen it, but I looked up the the Rotten Tomatoes score, and it came in, I think, under 50%. So it's technically a rotten film. Again, I've never seen it. I can't pass judgment on it. And I remember her initial review the Monday after, when she was asked why did the movie do so poorly. And she said, well, because people want to see 15 Spider-Man films, but they see a female-led movie and blah, blah, blah. I was like, all right, cranky pants, calm down. First of all, the very first time I remember seeing Elizabeth Banks in any film was in Spider-Man. She played Betty Brant. Very small role, but I kind of find it ironic that the person who got their big break in Spider-Man films, their movie was distributed by Sony, through whatever corporate ladder or whatever you want to go to, and she's taking a shot at Sony. I mean, it's none of my business, but it just seems like bad practice. Again, somebody's just walking in the back. I'm just double checking. Okay, I'm still safe. I'm not even bother editing this. I know that this is going to sound hilarious, but well. And she also is known for, I think, directed, she definitely starred in the first, directed the second, and she was in the third Pitch Perfect film, which a series I happen to like. The third instance I remember hearing, and I'm getting there, trust me, was Martin Scorsese. More recently, he had his film The Irishman come out. And when asked about Marvel films, he said, look, it's not movies to me. It's not films. And there was a big uproar, but I'm going to give Marty this. He corrected himself and he said, look, I'm not saying that they're bad movies, but they're not films. It's not art. That's all I'm saying. I'm not going to watch it because that's just not what I'm interested in. And I thought, okay, well, here's somebody who's at least speaking intelligently. On a side note, at that point, I had done a little bit of an art series where I kind of juxtaposed some comic book figures and characters into movie posters. I'm going to put a couple of those up, I think, maybe at the end of the video or something like that. I'll just sneak them in somewhere. Okay, so fast forward. I'm not going to tell you about Hacks. We talked about that. I'm not going to talk about Dune. We talked about that. Next, Ridley Scott comes along. His film, The Last Duel, just bombed. I haven't seen the film. There's only one person I know of who has seen the film. He doesn't really have good taste in films, in my opinion, but he said it was too slow for him. And Ridley Scott, I've loved some of his movies. I've hated some of his movies. It's Any Given Sunday. What are you going to get from Ridley Scott? He didn't direct Any Given Sunday. I just kind of threw that in there. Anyway. And I remember just reading about like a month ago when he's being interviewed about this. He's blaming superhero movies for the demise of his industry. And he's like, well, technically any character in a movie can be a superhero. You like Gladiator? Great, he's a superhero. And I thought there was a little bit of an interesting point in that. If you've seen Eternals, and I'll give you little spoilers for that too if you haven't seen it yet. A film, by the way, which was panned, but I really enjoyed. One of the things I really enjoyed about it was that it goes into the basis that these characters from myths that we know of, Gilgamesh, Ajax, Hector, all of these are actually Eternals. I should say this too. I don't go far deep reading into Eternals. I've tried to read a couple of the series and it just is a little bit dense for me, but I did enjoy the film. And I remember at that time when it came out, I thought what was interesting is that the critics hated it because they said, well, it's not a superhero movie. It's like, okay, so you've been arguing for how long about not liking superhero films, and now you have something different. You're saying, well, it's not what I'm used to. And I thought if that, in that kind of sense, I guess Ridley Scott is kind of correct in saying, really, any figure in his stories could be deemed a superhero. What some seem to forget is that superheroes have kind of replaced the big action stars. You don't really see, the big action movies of the 80s anymore because, and this is, I remember paraphrasing Sylvester Stallone, when Spider-Man hit, he proved you didn't need gigantic muscles and whatnot to do incredible things on the screen. And that's kind of when those action movies, started to fade a little bit. Nothing ever goes away, but it does certainly fade. The last two examples I do want to talk about, three really. More recently, Roland Emmerich, who has been involved in the film industry for a long time. You may have seen his films Independence Day or Godzilla, and the list goes on. And he recently had a movie out called, I think it was called Moonfall, which didn't look interesting to me. That's just my opinion. But almost immediately, because the movie failed miserably, he started saying, well, it's all these superhero films and these Disney movies and Star Wars movies, ruining movie theaters. It's like, well, considering the fact that many states have just reopened their movie theaters and many people, like myself, just aren't comfortable going to movie theaters, I think they're kind of holding your whole industry up right now. The point is, and the proof is kind of in the pudding. I haven't seen Spider-Man Far From Home yet, but I know that Sony was pushing real big to get some nominations other than effects or whatnot for the film, and others have as well. I mean, there were generally people I spoke to, and I'm talking about Uber fans or anything like that, but everyday people who said, this was a great movie, I hope it gets nominated for something. And really, it got snubbed as far as Oscars go. Now, generally speaking, I don't pay attention to the Oscars. I don't, or any really kind of professional awards, I guess you could say, like that. I just think it's kind of pointless. But when you take all of this into consideration, that you have some of the top talent and directors and actors and actresses in the film industry trying to speak in a way that is kind of putting the superhero genre film down. It's kind of almost interesting to see. It's almost like it's like a giant snub to an entire set of films, which, by the way, if you and I tomorrow stopped going to see superhero movies and nobody went, guess what? You're not going to see any more Avengers films or Batman films or whatnot, because the industry will move on to something else. So is this an example of, well, the biggest kid we've got to pick on the biggest guy on the block to make a difference? Or is it, well, you may have a point there. At the end of the day, I think it boils down to this. If you like something, whether it be superhero films, whether it be a particular comic, whether it be just something not even related to what we talk about, just go with it. Don't let these talking heads, or anybody really for that matter, dictate what you like and what you're passionate about, because the minute that you do yourself a disservice. And I kind of feel sorry for the people who are just kind of brushing off these films as nothing more than trash, because they're not experiencing some truly great things. I mean, look, to be fair, yeah, the superhero movies don't have the best track record up until maybe the past 20 years. And even still, there are some films that just weren't very good. But that's like anything else. In my opinion, the films that have been successful are the ones that push the genre forward. I'm talking about your Winter Soldier. I'm talking about your Guardians of the Galaxy. I'm even talking, if you want to go to the DC films, I think they recently started hitting their stride with Zack Snyder's Justice League, which in itself was kind of a big poo-poo to the industry. All I'm saying is continue to watch what you like. Continue to do what you want to do. As long as you're not hurting anybody, you're fine. And with that, still waiting for my wife, and it's still creepy out here. But I do want to thank you for joining me in my car in 19-degree weather in North Jersey on a Monday night. I hope that you enjoy the rest of your day, and I hope that you do so in a nice, warm, indoor setting. Thanks again for watching. Peace, love, and comics. Take care.